Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, I guess, depending on where you are in the world. I want to welcome everyone to this edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. On behalf of all of us at OTT.X, I want to thank you for joining us today to the series where we are delighted to bring you insightful, thought-provoking presentations across a broad spectrum of topics from thought leaders across our industry. We all recognize how important content is to the success of OTT businesses. The right title or series can mean the difference between success or failure. For your business to succeed in our highly competitive industry, content sellers and buyers need highly connected workflows and deep audience insights to tackle the exponential growth of today's streaming era. Imagine being able to predict titles that would best perform in certain territories for particular audiences and at specific times. Imagine being able to identify the titles that align with top performing content on certain platforms. In our session today, we'll hear from Whip Media's Executive Vice President and General Manager of the Whip Media Exchange, Sherry Brennan, about how to connect with buyers and sellers around the globe, simplifying interactions and enabling data-driven licensing decisions that can accelerate the deal-making process. Sherry will explain how the right consumer insights and tools combined with connected workflows are changing the way movies and TV can be evaluated, licensed, and delivered. Sherry Brennan is an industry luminary who's shaped distribution innovation and fueled content growth strategies for some of the world's largest entertainment organizations for more than 30 years. Evidently, she began her career when she was 12. Brennan spent nearly 15 years at Fox negotiating hundreds of content licensing deals, 7 years at Cablevision, focused on the then emerging VOD and digital TV, including content licensing, marketing, and UI UX. She's the co-founder of a social platform for women over 40 called The Wolfer. Brennan joined Whip Media's rapidly growing business driven by its core content value management and data platform in January 2021. Before we get started, I also want to thank Whip Media for participating in our webinar today and for their fantastic support of OTT.X at online and in-person events, including the Wednesday webinar series. Now, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sherry to get things kicked off. Welcome. There she is.
Hey, Eric. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to talk to you guys today a little bit about the Whip Media Exchange. I've got a few slides to run through, which I will share with the audience in a moment. And I want to invite anybody who would like to ask a question to type it in the Q&A bin, which you can find if you sort of hover at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A little box there. And if you click on it and type in your question, I think Eric will monitor the box for me, and he can either interrupt me midstream or I'll save some time at the end to address questions. But I'm happy to take them. So please let me know if there's anything confusing or anything you want me to dive more deeply into. The Whip Media Exchange launched commercially last week at MIP TV in Cannes, where I actually caught COVID. So you're seeing me live from London, where I'm stuck waiting for a positive test result to go away and turn negative. First time in my life I've wanted to be negative about something. Anyway, I'm going to get started with my slides. We are making the rounds of all the sort of industry conferences these days. So if anyone would like to learn more about the Whip Media Exchange in person, please set up some time to see us at one of these conferences. We'll be at NAB in Vegas next and various other places around the world. So I don't have to tell anyone who is listening to this webinar that we've hit a really critical tipping point in the industry. There's more content than you can shake a stick at, more platforms and anybody knows what to do with, more places for consumers to go to watch content than they can keep track of. And all of this means there is confusion not only for the consumer, but also for executives around the industry who are licensing content, whether they're buyers or sellers, or in many cases, both. We've seen just an exponential increase in the kinds of rights that are available, whether we're talking about windows collapsing or windows sort of being more bifurcated, whether we're talking about new platforms, AVOD, SVOD, linear platforms are of course still out there and really, really big, generating lots and lots of revenue. So there's just way more content to fill up all these platforms, way more windows and geographies for executives to keep track of. So the WIP Media Exchange really was built purposefully using various different data sources and backbone technology to help executives keep track of this business. We have added predictive insights to content listings so that executives on both sides of the buying and selling equation can understand best what content will perform well in a particular market and on a particular platform, can learn more about viewer demand for content, whether we're talking about things as simple as gender focus of content or deeper things like cultural compatibility or fit. We also have workflow tools that make it very easy for buyers and sellers to find partners that they maybe haven't met before, to re-engage with maybe relationships that have gone quiet because of personnel changes, and just to communicate in one simple platform with people they already do business with. Because we have access to a huge amount of data through other parts of our business at WIP Media, we see the business as it is evolving. So we are able to build our algorithms and our models and our workflow tools to keep up with that business as new, for example, new business models come along. We are able to build those into our system. We have lots of experience managing very complicated workflow processes for studios and platforms, and airlines and telephone video companies around the world already. Some of the biggest names in the business already trust us with their data. And so we've got this sort of great architectural backbone to build the software on, as well as a huge amount of data that I'll talk more about later. This graphic here is just sort of a picture of what I'm talking about. And you can see here just some examples of territories around the world, how many platforms there are in each of these countries. For example, the UK, 39 platforms, 124,000 titles. That's what we are currently observing in our TV Time app, which we own and gather a lot of data from. And you can just see some more examples here. This is sort of an exemplary of the proliferation both of content and platforms and confusion around the world, and what the WIP Media Exchange is meant to help make simpler to deal with. I wanted to take you guys through an example today of how our predictive insights can really help buyers and sellers make better content decisions. So I've come up with a super simple example to explain what we're doing, and then I'll go into a little deeper detail about it towards the end of the presentation. So let's just say you're a buyer and you have a content catalog you've licensed for use in the United States. And now you've decided you're going to expand. In this case, I've got Brazil and Mexico in my example. You're going to expand into Brazil and Mexico. And the question is, should I take my existing catalog and get the rights for Latin America? Or do I need to buy new titles to serve this new market I want to go into? Or you could be a seller, and let's just say you've got a big sales team that's been very successful distributing content in the US. Now you want to break into the Latin American market, and you need to know which of your titles are going to do best in those territories shown here. Again, this is just a super simple example. So what you can do if you're a buyer, you can take the titles, and I've just named them very creatively, A through E here, and you can see the demand score, which I'll talk more about. This is a proprietary metric that WIP Media has come up with. This lets you compare titles within a certain audience or territory platform combination and understand which are going to perform above average, which would show up as a score over 100, or below average, which would show up as a score under 100. So in this example, you can see the distribution of scores here is from 50 to 150. So I'm saying, the best performers in the US are A and B. Title C performs right at average, and D and E performs below average. Now what I can do is I can use the exchange and I can rank these or score these for these other two territories. And here in pink, you see that in Brazil, titles C and E would be the best performers with scores of 150 and 125, respectively. And in Mexico, they would also be the best performers. The order of them would be reversed. So in this particular example, we might say, maybe we want to take titles C and E over into Brazil and Mexico, but maybe we should think about buying different titles than A, B, and D and taking those into these new markets, because A, B, and D are expected to perform below average in these territories. Not saying you wouldn't want to have them in your catalog, particularly if you need volume or if you're trying to appeal to a different maybe demographic or something. But these wouldn't be A, B, and D in this example would not be the titles that we would expect to perform best in this market. So how would you go about then, since you're in this example, you only have experience in the US, how would you go about figuring out what content you want to buy for these other two markets? Well, of course, we've got an app for that, or, oops, I think I've lost my market. Okay, here we go. Excuse me. I am having a little technical difficulty with my slide. There we go. Okay, so now I've got some other titles that I'm looking at, Q through U here. And you can see that in my example, Q and R are the titles that come up with the highest demand scores in both territories. So those would be the ones that I would recommend buying for this, this new expansion. And then you might ask yourself after that, well, if I'm going to buy Q and R for these Latin American territories, how would they perform in the US? Maybe I ought to buy US rights for them as well. So we can score these new titles again for the US market. And you can see, in fact, that my example, title Q, is performing or expected to perform very, very well in the US. So in this particular case, what the exchange would recommend is that you buy titles Q and R for your new expansion territories, and that you also get the US rights for title Q because it's expected to perform well there. And that is, in a nutshell, how the demand score works for helping to predict content success. We, of course, get a lot of questions from our potential clients about what is this demand score? How does it get created? You know, what goes into it? What are the factors in it? And so I'm going to take a minute now to explain that. So we own a consumer-facing app called TV Time. This app is in over 20 million consumer devices around the world. We're in, I believe it's 178 countries around the world. And we collect about 40 million data points every month from this app. This app is free to consumers, and they use it to keep track of all that confusion that I was talking about earlier. So let's just say you've heard of a particular TV show, like my favorite example is Ted Lasso, and you don't know where to watch it. You can plug that into TV Time, and it will tell you what streaming service carries that show. And further, it will give you a notification if you're waiting for the new season to start. You can ask the app to tell you when there's a new episode available. And then as you watch shows, you can tick them off so that you don't lose track of what episode you're on, for example. And many, many people also tell us things like where they watched the particular show, what platform they watched it on, since many shows are on multiple platforms. And then they tell us how they felt about it. Did they like it? Were they surprised? Were they scared? Did they hate it? And they can also tell us what their favorite scenes were or who their favorite characters are and things like that. We allow people to begin tracking programs, movies, or TV shows as early as we know about them. So in many cases, we're hearing about programming 1 or 2 years before it's actually available to the public to be consumed. That allows us to measure something we call anticipation, and we can track anticipation versus viewership as we go through time. So as you might imagine, this kind of data is very, very valuable to content production companies, studios, movie studio companies, TV studios, as well as many digital platforms. If you think about a platform even as big as somebody like an Amazon or a Netflix, they often know a lot about what's happening with content on their own platform but they don't always know as much about what's happening with content outside their platform. What are consumers doing outside their platform? So this data helps inform many companies like that about what's going on in the content ecosystem at large, and of course, all around the world in all the different countries that we measure this in. We have less than 10% of our users in the US, so it's truly an international sort of panel of viewers. We measure a lot of things that are captured over here on the right side of my slide. Affinity is a really big key driver of the demand score. And affinity just measures basically if I've watched program A, how likely am I to watch program B or C or D? And the more likely I am to watch a particular show, having watched the first one, the higher the affinity between those two shows is said to be. That affinity index really helps us in the exchange come up with that demand score so that we can tell people how likely programming is that has never aired before based on things like metadata, similarity, and other factors. We can make predictions about content that's never actually even been viewed in a particular market or available there based on what we know about affinities and content preferences around the world. So really, really powerful data that we use to come up with these predictive insights. This is a little bit deeper dive into how the demand score itself is put together. As I said, we use a lot of this TV time user behavior data that we get in our models, and then we marry that with content outcomes data that we harvest from the other side of our business, where we're doing billions of transactions worth of processing every year for many, many companies around the industry. So where we have the ability to use that data in these kind of aggregated ways, we do, and we marry the two together to come up with these predictive insights, of which the demand score is the first one that we're really excited about. The demand score is a number between 1 and 200, and as I said earlier, a score of 100 would indicate a prediction of average performance for a particular market, whether that's just a territory or a territory and platform combination. A score above 100 would be predicting above average performance. Score below would be predicting below average. And the scores are calculated in a normal distribution so that we have sort of 15% of the scores on the low, on the long tails on either side, and 70% of the scores in the middle, basically. So we think that this demand score is going to really help people make better choices and really understand how content will perform in various markets. So in the new version of the exchange, which we just launched, as I said last week, we've also got lots of other predictive insights that we are excited to show people. But basically, we believe we've sort of put together the first of its kind sort of recommendation engine for content buyers and sellers. This set of predictive analytics really helps people, again, understand why content is expected to perform as we think it will, what will do well, what will do less well. It also provides a whole set of workflow tools to manage the content licensing process, to make introductions between buyers and sellers, to share contracts, to share content protection questionnaires, any of the sort of paperwork that goes along with making deals. It also lets you put all of your communication in one place. And then we have a whole network of third-party partners who can help with things like asset prep and fulfillment around the world, subs and dubs creation, and all of that sort of stuff. Another key factor of the Web Media Exchange is that for a buyer coming into the platform, the rights that they see are available to them. They will know that those rights are available to them in the platform and for the business model that they want to transact in. That is something that we're really, really proud of, and spending a lot of time making sure we get that right. We've got a team of people who's working every day with sellers and buyers to connect them, to update the rights that the sellers are providing to us, sort of close the loop as deals get done so that things get updated in the system. And we think this is going to really change the game around licensing platforms. This is just a little bit of a picture, sort of a wireframe of how it works, and some of the different things that we model in these predictive insights I've been talking about. So as I sort of have mentioned already, age and gender focus. We also take a look at seasonal appeal of content. The most simplistic example would be, of course, Christmas movies do well in December and things like that. There's tons and tons of metadata. You could sort of imagine an IMDb-like experience there where you're seeing all the different metadata around every piece of content that we have. We have a title database right now of about 230,000 titles and growing. We expect that to get to around 400,000 in the next couple of months. So huge number of titles that you can see these kind of modeled insights on in the exchange. We have platform and territory fit, as well as I think I mentioned cultural fit. These are additional factors that we measure and predict. We also, as I said, talk a lot about content affinity. We show how different titles that are similar in terms of metadata are expected to perform against any other title in the database. So really, really interesting set of data that is visible through the exchange, with the demand score, of course, sort of being at the heart of all of it. At the bottom here, you can see some of the sellers who are currently engaged with us in the exchange. What sellers do is put their rights into the system together with territory, window, and business model. And then we enrich those rights with all of these predictive metrics I've talked about. Then the sellers are able to curate offers for individual buyers or reveal all of their rights to all buyers. It's really up to the sellers what they want to do. And then the two parties can talk within the system as they see fit. Another distinguishing factor of the WIP Media Exchange versus other marketplaces is we're not requiring that the deals get done within the exchange, and we're not trying to take a piece of the action when deals get done. We have a subscription, sort of a SaaS business model in mind for this service, and that's the way that we're going to pursue it for now. Over here off to the right, you can see some potential integrations with other services. Screening rooms is a really big focus right now for us. We're evaluating a couple of options, and we expect to add screening room capabilities pretty soon. We also can integrate with other systems, like people have their own rights systems or finance systems, and we can integrate with all of those through our other workflow tools. So it's a pretty comprehensive service, and I think will really be at the heart of many licensing decisions going forward. This is a slide that shows a few more pictures from within the exchange. You can see here what we call a title card. So we've got the demand score over here on the right, this title showing up with a score of 177, which is obviously a really strong score. Spider-Man Homecoming is a movie. You can tell by the little thumbnail there. 2017, the genres, the synopsis, the original language and territory, genre and age focus here. And then you can click on any cast member and see what other content they've been in. And you can see also here some similar titles, which you could also click into. One example of how people might use this is, let's say Spider-Man Homecoming is not available to you, but you see some other title down here that is available to you. So you know this is a similar title, and maybe you can buy this one if you can't buy this one. That's the kind of thing people are doing with that data. And then this is how age and gender are surfaced here, and you can compare this particular title's characteristics to the characteristics of the territory or platform that you want to compare to, just to see how well this particular title fits in a particular situation. And then down here, this other bell curve compares Spider-Man Homecoming to a bunch of other titles which have similar metadata and tells you where this one would be expected to perform based on demand score and other factors. These are some of the other things that we measure. These are some of the other predictive metrics that go into the creation of the demand score. And you can see over here, this bar chart shows you what's pushing the demand score up above 100 and then what's pulling it a little bit backwards. So in this particular case, the only sort of slightly negative one is emotional fit. Everything else is either neutral or positive. Lots of different things that help explain the demand score. A little closer look at the gender and age focuses here. I think this is really, really interesting. So in this particular case, you can see this title skews a little bit male, both within the territory and also globally. And then on the age focus, same thing, it's really rather well balanced compared to the title itself is balanced compared to all viewership on in that well, this is for the whole world, all platforms, all territories. So maybe not the best example here. So this is just a little bit of a picture of how the licensing piece works. You can see that a request has been made here for some content. These titles have been selected and put into sort of a shopping cart and then requested. And the two parties are able to talk back and forth through the platform to make a deal. These are just some of the kind of areas that we expect the exchange to be really valuable for. These are some of the groups, so anything from sales to marketing, research, production, sales planning. We think that these scores and the data in the exchange, as well as the workflow tools, will really help with everything from acquiring content, sort of at its most basic, selling or buying content, to things like how to market it, how to understand consumer demand, how to perhaps appeal to a demographic on your platform that you don't already have, what content you might want to greenlight for a particular territory or platform. So all kinds of different use cases for this that we're currently exploring with clients around the world. So those are my slides for today. I would love to take any questions that anybody might have. I'm going to stop my screen sharing now. And Eric, maybe there are some questions.
Wow, yeah, that's really impressive stuff. It's been fun watching what WIP's been doing over the last couple of years. It's really incredible. Very, very busy, obviously, putting
it's been fun doing it too.
Together.
Yes.
And yeah, it's really marvelous. I'm congratulations. I'm really excited to see it. I mean,
Thank you.
I have just tons of things that I'm interested in, actually. One of them that popped for me was I noticed that in your demand score calculation, you're including a number of variables, a couple of which included memes, meme count, and meme engagement. Really? You can somehow relate memes to whether or not a title would be popular.
Well, let me just go back because I know I covered that really, really fast. But we own this app called TV Time. And in that app, that is some of the data that we collect when people want to give it to us. Mm-hmm. So obviously, any piece of information people want to give us, we take it and we use it as it fits into our algorithm. So I would say that that is probably a very minor factor in terms of influencing demand score. But to the extent there are tons of memes related to a particular piece of content, then there's obviously a lot of social buzz around that content, which could be good or bad, right? Sometimes social buzz is bad. Like, don't watch this show, it's horrible.
Or, it might not be bad, who knows?
But it might not be. I mean, there's the theory that there's no such thing as bad publicity, right?
Right.
So yes, that kind of activity would be picked up in our TV Time app, and that knowledge of that would flow through into our algorithms. There are literally thousands of factors that go into that machine learning model. So I like to say, thank God for big computers, because you couldn't do this with, an abacus for sure.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, right? Thank God for big computers.
Right? I mean, who would have a job in this industry at this point? So.
That's incredible. Okay. Along those lines, I have a question from one of our viewers today. Thank you for these questions, by the way. Does your measurement focus solely on smartphone data?
No.
On your collection process?
Thank you. That is an excellent point, and I'm sorry I wasn't more clear. The app is actually on the phone. However, consumers who use the app can tell us where they watch the program. So they might have watched it on a television on a linear channel. They might have watched on a TV on, connected to a Roku. They might have watched it on their computer, their phone, their tablet. Wherever they watched it, they can tell us that through the app.
Okay, but the data is
Okay.
collected on the app, and as
The
a
TV time, sorry, yes, the TV time data is collected through smartphone users. The app
got it.
exists there. Yes, but that's not the only source of data in our models, because we have lots of outcomes data and we also have third-party data sources that feed into
Okay,
it.
that makes sense. Okay, we have some more questions from viewers, but since I'm in charge, I'm gonna ask some of my questions. Um, when- let's say I don't have a specific title in mind, but I'm gonna produce some content, and I'm interested in kind of where and what genre, what maybe subject matter, the type of content, whether maybe it should be a reality series, or maybe it should be a drama, or different subject matter. Can your data give me indications of, like, right now, or this is the kind of content in these territories that would do well and that seems to be doing well? I remember. Go ahead.
Yeah, those are actually two different questions, and they're both great questions. What has done well in the past or is currently doing well would be revealed through a different product, the CVM, what we call CVM Insights. And that is a product that is harvesting all the real-time data from that TV time app, aggregating it, and sort of slicing and dicing it by, territory and genre and all kinds of other factors. So we do have a data service that people use for exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
In terms of predicting future performance, that's kind of where the exchange comes in. And yes, you could go into the exchange today and you could say, show me every, I don't know, horror movie that it has a demand score over 120 in Mexico, if you wanted to. And then, oops, sorry, just pulled my headset out. And then we would show you whatever those titles are. So we can show you the content that exists today and how we expect that it would perform in a particular market if you want to search for it that way. Now, our database right now is 232,000 titles. So if I were to do that example I just said, like show me everything with a demand score over 120 in Mexico, I'm going to get thousands of titles. So, then it would be up to you to sort of figure out what other questions do you want to ask in order to sort of summarize that information. Like, would you want to know how many of these are rom-coms or how many of these are horror?
I mean, I guess that's the thing, right? Timing is everything. So, like, is it a good time right now to make a political drama to release in the U.S.? Or, are people interested in, is fantasy kind of the thing that I'm gonna have a better chance of having be performance in the U.S. or wherever it might be? And maybe I've got a whole bunch of content already, but I'm trying to decide what to promote, or I'm trying to decide what to release and some timing for it.
Yes, that's where we can really help, because we could say, if you've got, 5 telenovelas that, are sitting there, they're doing really, really well in these particular territories around the world. Like take them to Turkey, they're going to do well.
Wow. Yeah.
We can help figure that out for sure.
Yeah, I bet it's probably surprising. I don't know. Do you have some examples of a title that just kind of bombed in the U.S.? It didn't perform well. It was kind of, and then it just did great. It was like the T-Rex of right. It's just like the U.S. But in Japan, like, everyone loved Mark Bolan and T-Rex, and like David Hasselhoff. What about that guy? He was huge in Germany. Are there examples of what's the David Hasselhoff of movies?
Well, that's an interesting question. We don't measure volumetrics. We measure what we think is going to perform above average or below average. And of course, what average is varies by platform and territory. So I don't actually come out with what we call volumetric predictions, like it's going to have 10,000 views in Belgium or whatever. So I don't have examples like you're suggesting.
Maybe just something in past, like, here's a title that didn't do well in the US, but it did do well in Turkey.
I mean, I certainly could set up a query. I haven't done so, to be really honest. I certainly could set up a query that said something like, show me titles that have a demand score under 80 in the
Yeah,
US,
yeah,
but higher than 120 in Belgium,
right,
right?
right.
I could certainly do that. I could probably do it while we're live, but I hate to do that
That's
because
okay. No,
just in
we're
case
not
I
gonna put you on the
can't.
spot. You got enough to think about here. But that's really cool. But it speaks to the power of the data that you have. There's a ton of different
Yeah.
applications for it, and I think you're probably, you know, just kind of scratching the surface of it with all of the metrics that you have, and you're getting with the. You mentioned billions of transactions.
Yeah,
Um,
well, yes, we collect billions of data points a year from our enterprise clients. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all coming in all the time. It's
Yeah.
only going to get more and more interesting, and there's more things that you can do with it. Um, all right, so here is another question from one of our viewers. Thanks again. So, actual viewership and performance predictions, are they translated from demand scores into specific number of viewers per platform, content, and country? Um,
And that's what I was just saying. No, we
yeah.
don't do volumetrics. I would love to do that. And maybe at some future point we will. But right now, no, we don't know, we don't get user data from every single platform. Like we could predict performance on HBO Max in the US, for example, whether something's going to do above or below average,
Hmm.
but I don't have access to viewer stats for HBO Max in the US. So I can't say what that would translate to. However, if I were an executive at HBO Max, I could do, right? I could say, oh, my average viewership is 10,000 views. So if something's going to do 25% better than that, then I know it's going to do 12,500 views. So I think that it will be useful to platform executives who do know their own usage data.
Hmm.
It will be,
Mm.
there should be a way
Yeah,
to proxy that. And
that's cool.
I know, and I'm really curious when people start to do that. I'll be watching to understand how accurate we are in that, right? Because we need to get better all the
Hmm.
time.
Well, you can use that to tune your own
Yes,
scoring and your own,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Which is the
That's
exciting part of a machine learning model, right? It gets smarter all the time.
Yes, and the scary part, it's we're not going to need business people anymore, Sherry. It's just going to be we'll hook
Oh,
our computers up, and then I guess I was going to ask, like, the way your model works, I can just license content by clicking some buttons, and I guess I'll never have to leave my, little home office here. What happens to all the schmoozing and cocktailing and dinners that we used to have?
are you kidding? I was sitting on the beach in France last week, like having meetings. So I
Okay.
am all for the in-person meeting. No, I actually don't think that's what's going to happen. I firmly believe that licensing content is art plus science. And we are not in the art business. We are purely in the science business. And we're going to help the people do their jobs better,
Hmm.
more efficiently, and maybe a little bit smarter. But no, and also relationships matter, right? And people are selling buckets of content. Most people are not selling one title to one platform. Most sellers are selling buckets of content, and they want to make their case why this title might have a demand score of 80, but actually they think that's undervaluing the title, and they could be right. We will learn over time and we'll refine. I think all of this is meant to help provide directional guidance, but
Yeah.
not meant to say you must license this and only this title. Like that
Yeah,
does
and
not
that's
make
true.
sense.
And like you do that at your peril, right? If you just follow
Absolutely.
what the
Yeah.
AI is telling you, um,
Yeah.
and I think that that's
It's a
something that
tool.
it's a tool, right?
Yeah. It's a
And it
tool.
makes us, as you said, it makes us better if we use the tool. But we still there's so much art that I don't think we have to worry about being replaced probably by, yeah, computers just
I
aren't
don't
good at
think so.
schmoozing and drinking cocktails.
They're
I'm
not.
I'm good at those things.
You give a computer a cocktail and it does.
That's
Um,
right.
Now, the other thing, though, is that it's also possible that a particular platform, let's just say this platform really appeals to males 55 and up, but they really want to broaden their audience and they really want to get some women in there. They might need content that has a low demand score, right? Because that content might have a low demand score, but it might have a really high gender preference for women. And they might say, oh, well, I'm going to try that content because I'm trying to expand my market or my demo. So I don't think it's like a low demand score is not always a bad thing. It might actually be what you're looking for in certain contexts. So that's another place where the human will know that. Right.
And it's actually like makes a lot of sense. You might, if you want to be a thrifty shopper of content,
well,
you could be looking
too,
for content that's like not performing very well, right? But you've got some data that says, well, that's a problem because of the way it's marketed. You're marketing it to a specific gender, and I believe based on the data that I have that it'll do really well. In this other demo, or maybe in a completely different territory, because I can tell, like we were talking about, this isn't going to do well in the U.S. It seems like that makes sense, but it looks like another title that did really well in Germany or something, and so I can get a bargain for licensing this and go kill it in Europe.
Exactly, you're on to it.
Okay, that's valuable, super valuable. One thing that occurred to me, and I hadn't thought about this before, what about different platforms? Like, do they have different demos? Does Netflix overperform for certain demos or in certain territories or in even certain times of year relative to another platform? So, Amazon seems to do better at this time of year or with this type of content or this demographic. I used to work at Microsoft, and I think that chainsaw killer horror movies did really well on the Xbox platform, but Breakfast at Tiffany, maybe not as well. And I wonder if that's something that, that's a pretty obvious one, right? Gamers versus not so much gamers, but I wonder if there's differences amongst platforms that y'all have thought about.
There are, and we definitely see differences in demand scores on different platforms, even within the same territory. We have not done a lot of what I call sort of like heuristics or sort of observational summaries of that sort of thing with our data right now, nor would we really want to publish that. That's sort of more for people to glean themselves as they want to use our tool. And it remains to be seen how like, are there observations we can make out of our data that we will publish? And, sometimes we do that, right? We write a lot of white papers at WIP. We just put one out, for example, about how the share of US produced content around the world is falling, viewership of it, I should say, and the share of content produced in other countries is rising. So even around the world, the US produced content is still huge, of course, but its share is declining as other countries get bigger in the content production game, honestly. So we do see a lot of that kind of stuff in our data, and we publish papers about it from time to time, actually quite often. So you can go to our website, and I think we should do like a master class of all the white papers on our website. There's a lot there.
We'd love to invite our members and attendees to go check that out, and also invite WIP to partner with OTT.X. We'd love to work together on a paper or some thought leadership pieces.
We would love to do that. And if there are questions people have, we're always happy to explore and see what we can help learn.
Yeah, you're all in a super fun, really interesting space that isn't going to go away, right? I mean, it's always going to be important. It's it's like I guess like cocktails. People are always going to want to drink. It doesn't matter how bad things get. No, that's always going to be there. I guess we have time for another question. Here's interesting thought about theatrical. Do y'all think about that? Do you measure streaming versus theatrical performance at all?
We don't measure theatrical right now. We do have box office data as one of the inputs in our model. And we are adding it. I don't think it's there today, but that will be visible in our title cards, in our tool set. soon, I'll say. So we don't do anything right now in terms of theatrical predictions, but it is an area of expansion that I've thought about because the tool set lends itself to doing that, honestly.
Actually, I just thought about a whole new, like, we could talk for a really long time on this stuff. I'm
I know.
discovering. But what about localizations? I mean, right, there's different content probably performs differently depending on how it was localized and where it's being distributed. So, right.
Hmm.
So, as an example, I know that in the U.S., anime content um, does well when it's localized with English subtitles. If it was produced originally in Japan.
Yeah.
However, children's content, um, no matter what it is, doesn't do well if it's localized with subtitles because many children don't want to read them, or maybe they want to hear the the um, the, the dialogue in their own language. So that's a really obvious example.
Yeah.
Are those things that you all take into account? Like this title did really bad when it was released. It was, a kid's title, and they released it in Germany, and it just tanked. But the version that was released with German subtitles as opposed to being dubbed in German. Is that something that you take into account or you're thinking about?
Definitely something we're thinking about. And it is sort of inherently taken into account by the data itself, because what we'll measure is did people watch it? Did they say they watched it? Did they say they liked it or enjoyed it? If it's a series, did they watch all the episodes or did they
Yeah,
watch one? Right. So it is sort of inherently captured in the data we get out of the TV time and in the outcomes data that we get on the other side. However, we don't know that per se.
right.
Yeah. So that's where the people come in, I guess, right? Because the people would know, oh, well, if that had been in language, maybe it would have done better.
Right.
And what we're seeing from all of our buyer clients is a huge appetite for subs and dubs in the local language. So there's
Hmm.
and we have a whole bunch of partners that we are making available to our clients for localization because that's so important. And many of the content suppliers either don't know what subs and dubs they have readily. That
Hmm.
data is very difficult sometimes to get your hands on. Or if it's a market like Serbia, maybe they don't have a Serbian dub or sub,
Right, right.
but if they could get a deal, they'd make one. So we have sort of a network of partners that will be able to help give them pricing on that and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, that's just, another area, I guess, to think about.
Yeah.
Because the title could look really like it's just not doing well, and the reason it's not doing well is just because it wasn't localized the right way for
Yeah.
whatever
It is a
the
big
market and whatever the
factor.
content was.
Yeah, totally. You're totally right.
Really, really cool. All right. Well, you know what, Sherry? I think we're gonna have to close things off here for the day, but love to have you back again to talk more about this stuff. And I know that Whip's going to be involved with a bunch of our events coming up in the rest of the year. So I'm sure that folks, as well as us, will get a chance to meet and talk more about this really interesting stuff. So thanks again, Sherry, Brennan, and Whip Media for that thought-provoking presentation. It's super interesting. Thanks to all of you for attending this edition of the OTT.X Wednesday webinar series. As always, session was recorded and will be available on the OTT.X website at OTTX.org. Sherry, we had a request also for your contact information. If you would drop that into the chat
Sure.
on, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great for many of our attendees, I'm sure.
Of course, and you
And
can always find me on LinkedIn and at the Whip Media website. There's also a way to inquire about the exchange on the website. And like I said, we're going to be at pretty much every conference known to man in the next year. So come find us.
And speaking of those conferences, we've got a bunch of stuff coming up on OTTX, very much related to conferences and all the online stuff that we do. I want to brief everybody on a few things that are coming up. First off, We're kicking off the OTT.X Leadership Development Foundation's webinar series with a truly tremendous group of leaders from our industry. It's going to be led by moderator Davinder Luthra-Sphyrix, a great friend of OTT.X. This group's going to be discussing the necessity of rethinking what a healthy work environment and culture looks like in our post-pandemic world. Really fantastic discussion. So do check that out and pass it along to your colleagues and friends. After that, we are going back to Vegas. We're taking this OTT.X ship on the road, and we're going to partner with DPP and RSG Media, kicking off NAB the right way, of course, with a cocktail party. This is going to be at the Future of Delivery Lounge in the Las Vegas Convention Center's newly built West Hall. Note that the party is reserved for OTT.X members, and you do need to register to attend, which you can do out on our site. And of course, everyone's talking about the inaugural OTT.X X Fronts, our first in-person event of the year, and the place to be for anyone in the ad-supported OTT industry. We've got an incredible slate of content creators, platforms, ad tech companies, advertisers, and agencies coming together for business discussions, pitch sessions, and more. So get yourself out to the OTT.X website to register for that right away. A bunch more stuff going on. We're just out of time to talk about all of it. So do check it out at our newly revamped website, OTT.X.org, and find out about all of the things we're working on with our community of OTT.X members. I'm going to go ahead and drop the events link into the chat as well, so you can just pop over there really easily at the conclusion of the session today. So that concludes today's webinar. I want to thank everybody, and thanks again to Whip and to Sherry especially for being here. It was great having you. You have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.